Mr. Speaker, once again, we find ourselves staring down a deadline to fund the government. Deadline after deadline after deadline. And once again, we expect to see our colleagues across the aisle use this as an opportunity to put partisanship over people. And like so many Americans watching from home, I must ask, why does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening? My colleagues across the aisle either don't understand or simply don't care about how a government shutdown impacts people, real people. They seem to think it is a tool that they can use to force their cruel agenda on our communities, a tool to take more from the folks they have already hurt with their big, ugly bill. During recess, I conducted a roundtable with school leaders from 18 cities in my district, and they talked about the challenges students will face with cuts to SNAP benefits and the school lunch program, how students will not be able to show up to school ready to learn, how it would impact their learning experience, their school environment. I spoke to families who told me they didn't know how they would be able to afford health care once their Medicaid is cut, once the effective date kicks in. We talked to many constituents about how they would be able to afford to put food on their table once SNAP benefit cuts kick in. The people deserve a government that works, a government that works for the people, one that's stable, functional, and focused on solving real problems, not constantly heading toward a shutdown, not a government engaged in constant cruelty, constant chaos, constant confusion. Once again, the American people deserve a government that works for them. That means investing in what matters. Public safety. How about education, transportation, healthcare, and the services that families and communities rely on the most? Those are the programs we should be investing in, not cutting. We need more investments in these programs. So, we must and will oppose attempts to slash those services. And we won't support a partisan, poisonous bill that hurts the people we serve, the people that depend on us, the people that have elected us to work on their behalf, and their behalf only. And that is as simple as that. We will not support it. Point blank, period. Better is possible. We know better is possible. We know better despite what the other side of the aisle does. That is why we are going to continue to fight like hell for the people that we deserve, because we know that they deserve better. And we will not stop fighting, no matter what. We are fighting not just to pass something to keep the lights on for another few months, but for a solution that actually serves the American people, something that makes people's lives better. Did we forget why we are here? Why the people elected us? They elected us to make their lives better, not to hurt them or make their lives worse. That's not our job. Let me remind you, the people elected us, they put their trust in us to make their lives better, not worse. I invite all my colleagues to join us. Join us to fight for people, to work for people. Let's get back to the real work in these chambers. Let's make it make sense. why we are here working on behalf of our constituents who have elected us. Let's get back to the people's business. With that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to call up my colleague at this time, Sydney Kamblogger-Dove of California.
Thank you to my illustrious colleague from the great state of New Jersey for being the lead for tonight's Congressional Black Caucus Special Order Hour to talk about, the government. Hello. To talk about money, to talk about funding, to talk about keeping this government open, to talk about why we come here every single day of each week, and why some of us are fighting for the American people, and while other of us are fighting for Donald Trump. This is a great time to share that Republicans don't care about you. You, all you. Trump doesn't care about you. None of you. They don't care about your safety. They don't care about your freedom. They don't care about your voice. They don't care about your vote. And they don't care about your pocketbook. You would say, why does the Congresswoman from California say this? Because I have receipts, and I'm going to share them. Earlier this year, Republicans voted on a $4.5 trillion tax cut for the richest of the rich. In order to pay for that, they passed a honkin' series of cuts to all of the services that you need to help you survive and thrive. What kinds of services, you say? Things like shutting down or threatening to shut down Social Security offices in high-rent districts, which would include all of Los Angeles, cutting funding to SNAP, so young mothers who are looking for baby formula for their babies, folks who need help buying food so that maybe their children's bellies aren't empty when they're going to school, farmers who actually produce goods that are sold into this agricultural program, those services would be cut. Cutting funding to the Small Business Administration. Most people in my district are interested in their hustle, their small business that they're trying to get off the ground. I thought that's why the SBA was developed, designed, created to help you start your business. Now we have a president that wants to cut that, maybe because he wants all the money. We have a president supported by a Republican Party that is sending the National Guard, militarizing soldiers against citizens in those cities and states. They are right here at Union Station in Washington, D.C. You taxpayers are footing $1 million a day for these National Guard members to pick up trash, doing the job that sanitation workers would be doing in this District of Columbia. We're talking about $770 billion to Medicare. I talk to young people in my district, Mr. Speaker, they say, well, I'm not on Medicare. I say, that's right, maybe you're not, but your grandmother is, your elderly aunt is, and you know what? The doctor you see is able to see you because of the reimbursement they're getting from a Medicare patient. And with these cuts, we are hearing from community clinics, we are hearing from hospitals, we are hearing from doctors and other healthcare providers. They're trying to see if they're able to stay open to help you when you get sick. But that's been cut. Last administration, President Biden said, I'm going to forgive student loans. This president say, oh no, everybody pay except me. Everybody pay but me. And not only are we doing away with that forgiveness, but we're actually capping the amount of money that you can get in student loans and in grants to maybe go to medical school, because Lord knows we need more doctors, especially in rural communities, willing to help Americans as they search for health care. One place, though, that didn't get cut is ICE and Homeland Security, because this is an administration that wants his own personal militia to go after folks who ask for the truth. But these cuts also mean and include cuts to federal jobs. California is the state with the second largest number of federal workers. workers who have been answering the phones when you call, checking on your application when you submit it, getting back to you about your benefits. Well, those folks are being terminated. Oh, but this is the president who's all about workers first, which is why I had to drive down this city to the Department of Labor and see the president's face on the big old banner. Well, why are we spending money on these banners but cutting money to farmers? Yes, because dismantling USAID and cutting USAID is more than just what's happening in other countries. You're actually also cutting contracts to American farmers who produce goods and products that we then sell to other countries. This is all about hurting all of us. Funding to the National Institute of Health, cutting cancer research. In my state of California, we were on the cusp. We were on the cusp of clinical trials because a cure had been found for breast cancer. On the cusp of clinical trials, in the works, a cure for prostate cancer. All of that now stopped because of cuts to the National Institute of Health. So that's what we're talking about. And the party in power has a responsibility to make sure that those services, those basic services, because nothing I talked about was not basic, to make sure this party in power has a responsibility to make sure that those kinds of services are not cut. I'm trying to find out why we have a president who is chair of both the World Cup and the Olympics, events that will be happening in my district, in my state. World Cup festivities will be happening in cities across this state. Well, how can you have cities who are preparing for the World Cup and the Olympics when they are being attacked by the federal government, when we are not providing them the supports that they need to get ready? And now here we are on the verge of the third set of receipts, a funding shutdown, which is imminent, and which can be stopped by the party in power, the Republicans. But Republicans have to make a decision. Are they going to prioritize the American people, or are they going to prioritize the President of the United States? I don't know about you, but the Congresswoman from New Jersey talked about hosting town halls in her district. I did too. I didn't meet a constituent who said they wanted the Rose Garden paved at the White House. I haven't met a constituent who said they want to see more gold candelabras in the White House. But I have met constituents who've said, what's going to happen to my health insurance? When is ICE going to get out of the kindergartens in Los Angeles? So I hope we don't have a government shutdown, but that would require Republicans to make some decisions about who they're going to support. On top of the last thing we did before the beginning of August, which was Republicans voted on a rescissions package, which was essentially giving the president back money that Congress had already voted to appropriate to go to the American people. And some Republicans said, let's do this once a month. This not no exercise. It's like, let's go on a diet once a month. Okay, let's cut more money out of the hands of the American people. It's not funny. I know people think that Congress is drama and theater, but it's not theater when you talk to a constituent who says, thank God you called the agency on my behalf so that I could get my benefits back. It's not theater when you have a constituent who's older, who's going to get evicted, and they say, thank God you called HUD to make sure that my grandmother doesn't get evicted from her house. I thought that's what the government was supposed to do. How come no one answers my calls? How come this president doesn't care about me? This is not theater, people. We have farmers in trouble. We have young children who are hungry. We have elders who are concerned if they are going to be able to go to the doctor when they get sick. We have young people who don't even know if it's worth them going to college because they don't know if they will find a job. And we have partners and friends who have opened up businesses in our cities across this country who are afraid to show up to their job because they don't know if they will be snatched and deported, even though they are legally allowed to be here. What is going on? We read these headlines, it does not sound like anything that should be happening in the United States of America. It's one thing to talk about policy, but it is another thing. It is another thing to cut the benefits of a veteran who put their life on the line to protect us. It is one thing to debate policy. It is another thing to vote to shut down a hospital. It is one thing to talk about foreign policy and where we should be and what we should be doing. It is another thing to cut jobs, folks who are building things that keep us safe. I had a gentleman come into my office a week ago. He is not even in my state. He has a business in Mississippi, and they make the thermostats that we put in the refrigerators. And they have investments in another country. But they have American people, American workers, working in Mississippi and in that country. And you know, the money they make comes here. And he said, I'm going to have to fire all those people and shut down because of these cuts on top of these tariffs. Now, that man didn't vote for me. That man probably didn't even vote for my candidate. But he came in my office and said, can you help? What is going on? What is going on? And my answer was, we got some people up in here that ain't got no courage. They don't have no courage. I don't owe you nothing. You're not in my state. But you're trying to create jobs to help American people, give young people an idea about how they can start their own business and be an entrepreneur and come up with a product they can patent that's good for business, that allows them to earn some money, save some money, start a family. All that is in jeopardy because of these cuts, because of these rescissions, and because of this potential government shutdown. I don't know about you, but when I'm in trouble, I don't call somebody and say, hey, are you a Republican or a Democrat? I just call and say, can you help me? My dad got health issues right now. I was on the phone. I wasn't saying, hey, who did you vote for? I said, hey, can you help my dad? That's what Americans across this country are asking. Like, are you, the people in power, the people with the gavel, are you going to help me? Make me drop my notes. And I want the party in power to say, yeah, I'm going to help you. I'm going to prioritize you. And I'm just not going to prioritize you in March of 2026 before my name is on the ballot. I'm going to prioritize you right now. Because American companies, American students, American innovators, American researchers, American veterans, American farmers, American students deserve all of us fighting for them and not for one person who's only looking to hang more banners up and put up more gold candelabras at 1600 Pennsylvania. Thank you, and I yield back.
Wow. I'm telling you, it's time for us to work for the people. The fine gentlewoman of California, thank you for those remarks. It's time for us to work for people. That's what we're here for. That's what your constituents voted for you to do, not cut. Think about it. The next time you see, I say this to my colleagues across the aisle, the next time you're out in your district working, ask one of your constituents, is your life better? Has your life been better since January 20th? Is it better? Ask. See what they tell you. I can bet you that it isn't. With that, I would love to turn it over to my co-anchor of this special order hour, the fine gentlewoman from Virginia, Rep. McCullen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank Congresswoman McIver for co-anchoring this special order hour tonight. You know, you don't grow up in the Commonwealth of Virginia without getting history lessons. And those lessons stuck with me. And I am cognizant that next year, we have the opportunity to celebrate 250 years of an extraordinary, revolutionary, radical idea that had never been tried truly before in the world. The idea that the power of government derives from the people, not from brute force, not from getting it from an inheritance, but the consent of the governed to give power to the government. And why do they do that? To meet their needs, to solve their problems. And it's an idea that sparked my imagination as a child. It's an idea that as I listened to my parents tell stories of what their life was like growing up during the Depression, growing up during Jim Crow, where they didn't always have their needs met, not because of any fault of their own or their parents, but they saw the best of government through the New Deal, where the federal government used its power to help people who couldn't afford to put food on the table, to help people who lost their life savings overnight in a stock market crash, but didn't help all the people. Because at the same time, my parents saw the worst of government, a government that oppresses some for the benefit of a few. And that sparked my imagination again to say, what can I do to make government that force for good, that helps people and solves problems, rather than oppresses some for the benefit of a few? And eventually, that question led me to Congress. And after growing up as a member of Generation X on Schoolhouse Rock, learning about just a bill's journey to becoming a law, I got here and thought, they didn't get it right. Because there is no song for what I've seen since coming to Congress, particularly in the 119th. We stand here today 22 days before government funding expires. We stand here, House and Senate Democrats, ready to pass a bipartisan funding bill that will improve the health of Americans, that will improve access to quality, affordable health care, that will improve the safety and economic well-being of every American. As a matter of fact, our leaders sent a letter to Republican leadership in the House and the Senate to that effect. And the very next day, the president sent down a pocket rescission that the Republican chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee said was unlawful. I happen to agree. And most of this Congress, we have watched a president ignore the will of Congress. Or we have seen, at the president's request, congressional Republicans cut Medicaid, cut SNAP benefits, put lifetime caps on student loans, federal student loans, cut funding that Congress appropriated for cancer research, for the National Institutes of Health, a whole host of things. And people at home are scratching their heads saying, how does this help me? How does this solve my problem? It creates more. I spent the August recess mostly in my district, but I spread out a little bit beyond my district because I'm one of only 2 Virginians on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Healthcare in particular has been very important to me. And so I spent time talking to my constituents and listening, more importantly, to their concerns, what they were worried about, what they were afraid of. And then talking particularly to healthcare providers across the Commonwealth. What I heard was a lot of anxiety and fear. Whether it was my farmers who, because of tariff policies, aren't seeing the kind of orders, particularly for soybeans, that they used to see this time of year to go overseas. Or they can't get the equipment to repair, or parts to repair their equipment because of tariffs. Or businesses that have had to raise prices because they've absorbed them for as long as they can. And yet they're in that between a rock and a hard place where if they raise their prices too much, especially the small business owners, they're going to go out of business. I heard from state legislators who wonder, how am I going to fill the hole in my state budget caused by cuts to Medicaid, cuts to SNAP, the requirements on states to pay more, when I'm also trying to fill the holes in NIH funding, in all the other healthcare-related funding that helps me meet the needs of my constituents. When I'm waiting for the Department of Education to send money as schools are about to start that was appropriated, but we still don't have. And what my state legislators and my local elected officials told me was, I keep hearing people say about how this big, ugly bill is a tax cut, but what it's doing to me is forcing me to either cut services or raise taxes at the state or the local level. We have 22 days for Republicans to decide whether we're going to have a government shutdown. Because you made clear from day one that you're in charge. You've made clear from day one that the president can just decide not to spend money we've appropriated, and that's okay. You've made clear that you can pass reconciliation bills without giving us a seat at the table. So it's up to you whether we will pass funding that meets people's needs and solves their problems and keeps the government open or not. And I'm usually the eternal optimist. I'm a little worried. And Virginia, which has the second highest number of federal employees, and because of the cuts to the federal workforce, now has seen unemployment increase multiple times before the folks that were paid to stay home until September 30th come off of the job rolls. And those people are not able to find jobs because, unlike what our governor says, just because you are a NASA engineer doesn't mean that you're qualified for the healthcare jobs that our healthcare providers can't fill. And the big ugly bill is going to make all of those issues worse. So I want to share some of what I heard from our healthcare providers. You have the academic research hospitals who are worried they can't attract students, particularly medical students, because of the lifetime cap on student loans, which are $257,000. Today, I talked to a physician from Roanoke, Virginia, who has $500,000 in medical school debt. That math does math. When you have enough medical school debt, you have enough debt to pay for somebody's house. And yet, now the next generation of students coming up behind him can only get half of that in federal student loans. That math doesn't math. I visited a dental clinic in Abingdon, Virginia. This dental clinic, before the dental clinic, most people west of Roanoke who needed dental services, they waited until once a year when the Ram Clinic came to Wise County. And you would see the longest line you've ever seen of people waiting to get dental services because they live in a dental desert. Now, this clinic was able to open, and 80% of their patients are Medicaid recipients. The other 20% are uninsured. They're worried what happens when the Medicaid cuts take effect and the 80% starts to decline as to how many are actually paying something. They won't be able to cover their costs. When Medicaid reimbursement rates already were too low for them to completely cover their costs, that's going to be even harder. And the gentleman who represents that area, when I shared with the press what I was hearing from healthcare providers across the state, how they were worried they were going to have to close because of Medicaid cuts, said Democrats are just spreading fear. Well, imagine my surprise, actually not surprised, when last week Augusta Medical Group, which covers parts of Southwest Virginia, announced they were closing 3 primary care centers in Western Virginia as part of its response to the one big, ugly law. It's not hyperbole. You have rural hospitals that are already operating on the margins, who now are going to have to provide more uncompensated care. Because when people come off of Medicaid, when the enhanced premium tax credits for purchasing insurance on the exchange of the Affordable Care Act expire if we don't act by the end of this year, and more people become uninsured, they're not going to magically never get sick. They're going to get sick. And when they get sick and show up for care, they're going to come to the emergency rooms, and they're going to be treated. And it's going to be more expensive to treat them. And it's going to be uncompensated care. And guess who pays for that? We do. When our insurance premiums go up, or when the price of care goes up to recover the costs from private insurers. And all of these jobs that are being lost, that's also health insurance, employer-provided health insurance. So that's even more uninsured. And my colleagues on the Energy and Commerce Committee said, well, we're just trying to make sure we're making Medicaid sustainable for future generations. But that bill did not do a thing to address the underlying reasons healthcare costs are going up. It just provided that fewer people will end up getting health insurance. 17 million, up to 17 million, according to the Congressional Budget Office. I heard a lot about the SNAP benefit cuts. I heard from recipients who were worried, but I also heard from grocery stores, rural and urban. I represent Surry County. Surry County has one grocery store. It opened last year. Prior to that, it didn't have a grocery store for 20 years. That meant that people in Surry County drove 30 minutes to go grocery shopping. They couldn't get a lot of perishable items, probably what would fit in a cooler. But the Surry market helped with that. Now, the Surry market, it took forever, but we were able to help them become SNAP eligible to receive SNAP benefits. And because they knew that certain times a month, the SNAP recipients, mostly the seniors living in 2 senior facilities and walking distance to the grocery store, they knew when they came, they would buy enough fresh food, produce, and meat that it made it sustainable for the market to buy fresh food in bulk and know it would be sold. And that's 10% of their revenue. They're worried that when SNAP benefits, when people lose their SNAP benefits, they can't count on that bulk anymore. It's going to be harder for them to keep their doors open. I heard the same thing from the market in Churchill in downtown East End Richmond. Both of these areas were food deserts before these stores opened. Oh, by the way, a lot of their customers are also Medicaid recipients. So the same people who can lose access to their food benefits and lose access to their health care in the HUD funding bill could lose access to rental assistance as well. I heard a lot about FEMA cuts. We had a water infrastructure roundtable. I represent cities that have water infrastructure that's over 100 years old. And one of them received a grant to help upgrade its water treatment plant and its water infrastructure that failed earlier this year because of during a storm. And they got a resiliency grant from FEMA to help upgrade that infrastructure so that they would know when there is a natural disaster, the water infrastructure will survive it, and the people in the region can have clean drinking water. Well, the Department of Homeland Security canceled that grant, saying it had nothing to do with natural disasters. I think we all want to be sure that a water infrastructure system will provide clean drinking water when there's a hurricane or a tropical storm or another natural disaster. So these are just a few of the things that I heard from my constituents about the price of everything's going up. From childcare to healthcare to housing to utility bills, you name it. So far, the funding actions of the president and Congress has made it worse. We passed an energy bill last week that gutted the very programs that help people weatherize their homes to reduce their energy costs, to cut the very department that has that program in half. And people are asking me, weren't you elected to help people and solve problems? And I was. But we got to work together to do it. And just because Republicans are in the majority does not mean that you only govern over Republicans. But Democrats, Independents, and Republicans in Virginia's 4th District and across the Commonwealth want us to come together to help them and solve their problems. That's what the best of government does, not make them worse. And they made very clear, the people made very clear in November, and they continue to make clear today, cost of everything is too high. And when I talk to Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, rural, urban, and suburban, no matter where they were born, no matter what language they speak, no matter the color of their skin, no matter who they love, no matter how they worship, they want 3 things. They want to know they live in a thriving, healthy community. They want to know that they have a job that allows them not just to pay their bills, but to have a fair shot at a better life for their children than they had. They want to know when they get sick, they can go to the doctor and not go bankrupt. And every single person that I talked to in my district during the August period said, it's getting harder to do that, and I'm afraid it's not going to get better. We answer to them. When we all took our oath of office, we took an oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and to do our jobs to the best of our ability. And our job is when we see people who are hurting and we have the ability to help. Or as Matthew 25 says, when we see somebody who's hungry, we feed them. When we see someone who is homeless, we give them shelter. When we see someone who is sick, we provide them care. When we see a stranger, we welcome them. When someone is in prison, we visit them. Or at a minimum, how about we make sure they're in conditions that are humane? We can do a lot better, and the American people deserve better. But it is going to require us to put politics aside and focus on the people. We have 22 days to do it, Mr. Speaker. We have 22 days to decide, are we going to come together, find common ground, fund this government in a way that helps people and puts people over politics, or are we just going to let it all shut down? I didn't come here to shut down the government, but I also didn't come here to vote for a bill that strips food out of children's mouths. that strips health care away from the people that need it. That's not what my constituents sent me here to do. That's not what this government has done in the past when people were hurting. I end where I started. My parents saw the best of government, and they saw the worst of government. If we had another hour, I could walk down the path of how a lot of what I'm seeing in 2025 reminds me of what my grandparents saw in 1925, or what my great-grandparents saw in 1905. But we only have one special order hour and not two. So let me just say, let's find our better angels and show the American people the best of government, where we come together and put people over politics and meet their needs and solve problems together. With that, I yield back.
Thank you so much to the gentlewoman of Virginia for those remarks. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. Does the gentlewoman have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I motion to adjourn the House at this time.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for morning hour debate.